John, this is Zach Clark. I really appreciate your question and just want to take the time to answer it directly and personally since we were not able to do so on the live online masterclass. So your question is related to fundraising events, essentially. And you ask, you say our community is one with diverse backgrounds and economic means. What are some ways to manage the perception that some fundraising activities are being geared only toward those small groups that might be more apt to financially be able to give, the events being more expensive and then deterring some level of folks from joining or participating. And of course, in your case, you're a Christian school, and so this is even more of an issue of kind of people's perceptions toward these fundraising events. So I'm really glad you asked this question because this is something that a lot of times people don't really talk about as it relates to fundraising events. There are cultural implications in a community, meaning your organization, when you do fundraising events. This is not quite as big of an issue for a independent organization, but when you're talking about a Christian school that enrolls parents who are paying tuition, and there's an experience that's being provided, then how we do things as a community together really impacts the culture that is being created. And so fundraising events, no matter how they're done, have cultural implications. So I first want to say, before I address your specific issues here or question here, that I do want to be upfront that we recommend people limit fundraising events in a organization of any kind, but particularly in a school, to no more than 2 a year. 4 a year would be sort of max, but I would really prefer 2, and if possible to work your way out of even doing those 2. Fundraising events does not necessarily mean that you're growing a long-term giving culture. So I really view them as sort of the lowest effectiveness, lowest return on investment, and especially when you start talking about over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, the culture that is being created as it relates to a community of giving. So first of all, I don't know where that puts you, but to think our recommendation is limit the number of fundraising events to 2 to 4, preferably 2 or even less. Now, as to your question, what are some ways to manage the perception? Well, I think that one of the primary ways is try to get away from having fundraising events be the primary driver of raising money. Events do have a community building component to them. So making sure that one of these events is more broad based in its reach, and that's ultimately not just successful because of a handful of people doing so much giving at that event. Instead, I would really encourage you to move more toward a face-to-face approach and small group approach, so that over time, the whole point is that individuals are being engaged in the vision and the story of your school and being asked to give, being taught why you ask them to give and how you ask people to make the decision, and then they're followed up with to actually ask them to give and make a decision. So that way you're focusing much more on individuals rather than a broad-based approach of an event. So I would encourage you, first of all, that small group that people are talking about or seeing, or that you're concerned that people are perceiving the events geared to, those are the folks that you need to be building relationships with individually. And then as many people outside of that, engaging them in small groups. So the large groups events more are a culmination or a conclusion of the giving efforts that year, or they get you to that next level, or they fund a specific project or need that's harder to fund through just individual giving. So events are good at recruiting givers and identifying people who are sort of ready to give, and then you build from there. So it's probably not what you expected me to say about the events, but I think that there's just so many reasons that events being the primary driver of raising money is being problematic, and you're pointing out one of them. So there's no real solution to that problem. It's that you're applying what I would say is probably not the best strategy for your school community, if this is the kind of feedback that you're getting. So you want to have one event of two, or two of four that are far more broad, where everybody can be involved if you are doing them. But again, I just can't stress it enough. Less is more. Less is more. So that you're focusing on the strong giving, the significant giving from those individuals, by focusing on applying a face-to-face approach and a small group approach. So, great question. Hope that helps. There's not an easy fix to this one. I think you are asking the right question, because what you're saying is there's something here. There's something that's off here. It's not having the ultimate effect on growing our culture and our community that we wanted to have. So what do we do about that? So I would encourage you to look deeper and recognize that the question is, what kind of effect is this having long term, not how do we fix this problem related to the events. So a problem well defined is half solved, as they say. So I wish you the very best with that. I look forward to hearing from you. Let me know how we can help and encourage you along the way. And thanks again for this great question.